Okay. In theory, we are live now. In theory. But I always give it a second. We'll see. You can talk. You can say things. Usually at this point, someone tells me sooner or later something's up. Hey, good morning, everyone. If
Good
everyone's
morning.
actually there. Oh, okay. So we definitely have a video up on the channel. Whether or not people can hear us is a different conversation. Usually takes a second. So I'm just gonna jump. I'm gonna jump straight into this. And for those of you who are already here, great. For those of you who aren't, we have a few minutes of just rambling around before we dive into anything. Good morning, everyone. Hey, hey. Okay, well we got someone here. Professor Meg's in the channel. That's actually.
Nice.
I just mentioned to Josh a second ago, so let me take a step back. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. Good morning, everyone. I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and today we have with me Josh Wilgus from Chip Theory Games. Good morning, Josh.
What's
How's it
up?
going?
It's going good. It's going good.
Yeah, perfect. So, and I just said a minute ago before we started that I plan on playing Cloudspire a whole lot next week. It's actually with Professor Meg, who's in the chat. We played Cloudspire together at Origins, and we'll be diving into it together. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm looking forward to that. But yeah.
That's great. That's great. We were just talking off stream, but that game is such a home run with certain people. It seems to be like exactly the type of game they've been looking for their whole life. And other people, they bounce off of it really hard. So I'm excited that you love it, because the Cloudspire fans that are out there are perhaps more passionate about Cloudspire than the fans of any of our other franchises. So it's great. I love hearing that. I love hearing that.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. But, and then it's going to ask you something a second ago. Oh, Labersnistle's in the chat saying he loves Burn Cycle even at 3, which I'm pretty sure is a dig to me because of the fact that I said that I like Burn Cycle at 3, I really like it at 2, and I love it at 1. That was my own opinion on Burn Cycle. But okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just burn a few minutes on just generic questions before we dive into the actual topic of the day, which is going to be about shipping costs, all those things, which if you're sick of hearing about it, we get it. If you're not sick about hearing about it, then you probably haven't watched enough videos about it because it is an important conversation. But to kill time, let's start with the first thing that you probably can't answer much about. What's the
Sure.
most fun or interesting thing you can tell me about the Elder Scrolls IP coming up? And you
Oh
could say no
man.
comment. You could say no comment to anything I
Yeah,
ask.
no, I no, we're allowed to say a lot more about it.
Great. If you're not sick of it,
And I should say we want to release a lot more information about it in an official capacity, and we're hoping that we can do that soon. Part of working with any IP out there is that they obviously need to approve everything that we put out about the game that represents their IP. And so that's been a challenge for us. It's been an interesting process. And Bethesda, if you were not aware, who
mm-hmm.
invented and make the Elder Scrolls video games, they have recently been acquired by Microsoft. And so there's just a lot of rejiggering of
I did
things
not know
behind the
that.
scenes.
When
Oh
did that
yeah,
happen?
so they've been acquired by Microsoft. Like Starfield, their new video game IP, it's going to be Xbox exclusive, and so on and so forth. Which it's controversial, et cetera, et cetera.
It is very controversial. A Bethesda game
Yeah.
that's Xbox exclusive. I
Yeah.
haven't played a Bethesda game in years, and I'm offended.
Well, there you have it. I'm console agnostic, so though I'm primarily a Nintendo guy, so whatever.
I mean, I have an
Um,
Xbox. I'm just offended on behalf of the PC community, which is me
oh
too.
well, it'll be on PC. Sorry, I should say PC Xbox. So
Oh,
but
okay.
it won't be on PS5. Yeah. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, fine.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of just rejiggering behind the scenes that has made that approvals process take even longer than it normally would. And so we have a whole bunch of stuff we're awaiting word on, and as soon as we start to hear some of that stuff, you'll start to see Chip Theory talking about it from our social channels more and revealing more information. But man, I think the most exciting thing to me, and everybody has a different reason that they love Too Many Bones when we talk about Too Many Bones fans, but the Splice and Dice expansion for Too Many Bones was a Build a Tyrant expansion. It allowed you to create kind of your own end boss in two different ways. When we released that, a lot of people were talking about or asked us, like, what if you did create your own gear lock? What if you did create your own gear lock? And the Too Many Bones system doesn't really allow for that in a clean way. It would need to be this like giant expansion, and it just wouldn't work. But Elder Scrolls games are all about building your own character, about kind of taking that character in whatever direction you want. You can create a battle mage that wears heavy armor and casts destruction magic spells, even though that's typically a bad idea from a min-maxing standpoint, you can do it, right? You can do whatever you want. And so we've really tried to lean into that with the Elder Scrolls and do it in a way that will be familiar to a lot of Too Many Bones fans. So there'll be a lot of unlocking of dice, of all sorts of various abilities. And but then in addition to that, we're adding that exploration element and that dungeon delving element that is so popular and so interesting about the Elder Scrolls. So it's much less on rails than Too Many Bones is in that respect, and it allows you to kind of adventure off and do your own thing in a much more meaningful way than Too Many Bones does. At the same time, we're not going full on like Tainted Grail, Gloomhaven, this massive campaign that lasts for 150 sessions or whatever.
Good. I'm glad to hear.
Yeah. Part of that is because like it feels so good to unlock new dice and to build your character. And so over the course of, if you picture Too Many Bones, which has 16 unique skill dice for every character, by the end of any game of Bones, you've unlocked at least probably half of those dice, give or take. And that's in a 2 to 4 hour session of Too Many Bones. And so we want to keep allowing the player to feel good about unlocking things and not just max out their character after after their 50th game of the campaign. And then also just in terms of who we are as players and our current kind of station in life, which we all have kids and that kind of thing. None of us have time to dive into these massive campaign games. We just don't. And also because of the amount of new board games that are coming out constantly, we personally believe that most people don't have time for that. Like everybody loves the idea of these campaigns, but what we, at least what I read online, is that nobody has time to actually engage with them meaningfully. So the idea behind Elder Scrolls is that you'll play a game over 3 sessions. So there is a little bit of a campaign aspect to it. We've kind of taken some of the ideas that worked really well in Hoplomachus Victorum, which is releasing later this year, and applied them across the Elder Scrolls a little bit. So it's not a reskin of Too Many Bones. I think there's been some assumptions that when we talk about it being inspired by Too Many Bones, it'll be Bones with Elder Scrolls skin on it. It's a very different experience. The character building and progression is different than Bones, even if it's similar. And there's a lot of new systems in place. At the same time, we've also tried to streamline a lot of things. So a lot of the criticism that Bones gets for having crazy edge cases all over the place and, rules complexity. Elder Scrolls is by no means a simple game, but we're trying to streamline a lot of things and kind of learn from some of the clunkier bits of Bones that, 5 years after release, we wish we could maybe go back and streamline. Now we're taking what we've learned from that and applying it here. So we're still hoping to bring it to crowdfunding this year. And again, some of that will depend on how fast we can get some of these approvals through, but we are still hoping that this fall is when the campaign for Elder Scrolls will be on GameFound. So
is it more or less similar to Too Many Bones than Hoplomachus? My own stance for that, by the way, is I always consider the Hoplomachus chip system and ability system to have enough parallels that I consider them comparable, while obviously being very different systems.
Mm-hmm. I would say it has more in common with Too Many Bones as an overall game. We are trying to speed up combat and make combat a little bit more seamless. You'll be able to do big blasts of damage in a more in a simpler way than in Bones, where you might have to plink an enemy for a long time. The Elder Scrolls games, if you play the video games, you can usually dispatch an enemy very, very quickly, and it's not this like hardcore tactical battle that you have to think really, really hard between every move for your optimal advantage. And so we're trying to infuse a little bit of that. The enemies as a whole are a little bit weaker, so they can be dispatched more quickly. But yeah, I would say it has more to do, or more in common with Bones. But there are some things also, like I said, from Hoplo. It's hex. There's hexes instead of like the 4x4 battle mat that you see in Bones. So there are a lot of things also that you'll recognize from Cloudspire and Hoplo, and we've taken inspiration from. So yeah,
cool. Well, that sounds intriguing. And so now, but what are we in? We're 10 minutes into this live stream, which means now everyone who's been here for all the fun, interesting stuff, we're going to talk about the really interesting thing: shipping. shipping costs. So we're going to pivot to the actual conversation now that we have a little bit of a thing up and running, which is a greater, larger conversation about shipping, about costs, about the nature of the costs you see, the costs you don't see, the well-being of companies, all of those kinds of things. And this is a conversation I recently had one with James Hudson from Skybound Games, from Druid City Games. I've actually been collecting a whole bunch of information to kind of have this conversation at some point in a different way that I haven't actually gotten around to, so this may just take that proxy and I'll just jump in with various tidbits. But in general, as a little bit of backdrop for those who don't know what's going on, the very short version of everything is Kickstarter has changed, crowdfunding has changed, board games in general have changed. You're just seeing it a little faster in terms of crowdfunding up front. Also, you're seeing it a little worse because of the nature of paying for something today versus seeing adjustments to those costs tomorrow, which can really hurt, and can hurt a lot of things. It can hurt trust, it can hurt your belief in the system, it can hurt your relationship with companies. And this has been an ongoing conversation for roughly 11 months now. One thing that I saw very fascinating, I saw a post from somebody that I thought was very dead on, and it might sound dismissive, it's not meant to be, but I thought it was very dead on, which was, it was a recent post where somebody said, hey, 11 months ago, everyone's like, hey, bad changes are coming to the industry and shipping is getting expensive and things are going bad. And everyone's like, okay, cool. 11 months later, everyone's like, what's going on? Why didn't you tell us? Which is what's happened. Like, I can trace these conversations back to 11 months ago when they first started happening, when people were starting to call that there was a change coming to crowdfunding. And the problem is, as that change hits more and more people, hits more and more companies, as you get more and more increase in costs and things, we're seeing a greater degree of dissatisfaction, of frustration around the general state of the industry, of companies, what they are and aren't doing, and just the fact that things are getting more expensive, both upfront as well as after you've paid for it. To that end, there's been lots of channels having lots of conversations about this, lots of publishers having lots of conversations about this, lots of people just trying to convey information in a way that isn't inherently as problematic because there's a conflict of interest. There's people like myself who are kind of in the middle, and I have my biases, but I don't have necessarily the paper in front of me. And then there's that conflict of interest where people backing games are like, well, why aren't things cheaper? And then companies, dealing with these costs on their end, it's like, well, of course you're going to tell us it's more expensive. Why wouldn't you? And so it starts this larger, more complicated conversation that, well, this is just one step in that conversation. Another video that I recommend checking out, by the way, for those who are interested, is the Dice Tower. Did a great video on this as well, about the state of the world, about the state of shipping. There's a lot of content out there for you to consume. This is just one more piece of that conversation. Josh and I are going to take it off to a degree, but if there are any questions in the chat, if there's anything you want to see, if there's any specific questions you have, however aggressive, or not aggressive, however probing, let's use the word probing, aggressive I don't engage with, but however probing,
suspicious, however, yeah.
If you want to ask a question, if you're curious, if you've heard something this way, you heard something that way, and you want an answer, we'll try to get to it. And so with that, Josh, I'm going to start off with the first thing, which is one of the things that comes up a lot. And this is freeform to a degree. I'm going to start off with this and we'll just see where the conversation goes. But it's something that I've seen come up for years now, even before these shipping conversations started. And it's something that kind of, I guess the nature of me being an eBay seller back in the day is something that I kind of see, which is this weird concept of free shipping. We have these conversations around, hey, this thing is shipping free, why can't everyone ship free? And my own background to that has always been the general concept of, well, nothing ships free, it's just all built into the cost inherently. And in the case of chip theory games, we see that a lot when we see, and I think you've actually changed it recently, but until recently, you had $10 shipping, which I think recently has become free shipping.
So we shifted, it was $10 shipping in the US, flat rate. So basically no matter what you ordered, be it big, be it small, it pretty much came out to $10 because even small stuff tends to, we ship everything from Quartermaster, which is, they're kind of the biggest player in the board game shipping industry. And working with them allows us to get a little bit better shipping rates in general because they do so much bulk shipping for so many companies that they can negotiate better rates with FedEx. That's basically how that works. So we were doing $10 flat shipping basically no matter what. We still are doing that largely on our crowdfunding campaigns. So we've got a Burn Cycle campaign coming up in 2 weeks, and it will be $10 flat shipping on GameFound. Actually, I think it may be $15 flat shipping. We're still kind of hashing that out, but on our website anyway, where you pay full price for everything, full MSRP, we have moved that away from just the flat rate shipping. So the flat rate shipping now is $15 until you hit $200 on your order, and at the $200 mark your order will ship free. So that allowed us to raise the rates a little bit on the lower
Items.
value orders. Yeah, and but also, you know, give people an incentive hopefully to add a few things to their order. So that's how we're currently approaching it. It's more than that in Europe. It's, I think, 25 euros flat rate until you hit the 200 euro mark, and then items ship free in Europe. So
Perfect. And so that policy change aside, I'm going to focus just on what it's been until now, because that's usually the conversation. But just that general idea of the $10 shipping, the amount of times the conversation comes up when a company sits there and says, oh, we've had to raise our rates from $15 on this Kickstarter to $27, and then a lot of people jump in with, but Chip Theory Games is shipping this guy behind me for $10. How do they do it?
Right. Well, we don't. Is the simplest answer. We don't ship it for $10, and in fact, it's not even close. So I would back up, and we've only been able to do this and operate this way for a while. And to be clear, it's a marketing effort first and foremost, or you know, if you don't want to call it a marketing effort, you could call it just basic human psychology. But you know, going back a few years where we just charged actual shipping, and you know, time has no meaning in COVID, so I forget how many years ago this was, but 3 or 4 years ago, it was actually Isaac Childress in Gloomhaven that ruined it for the rest of us.
Yes.
You know, it's funny it's funny for other people now to point to Chip Theory and be like, how do they do it? Because everybody used to point to Gloomhaven and be like, because the Gloomhaven reprint Kickstarter, I may be misremembering it slightly. It's out there on the internet to check, but I believe U.S. shipping was $10 flat rate, and then worldwide it was like $25, something like that. So it didn't matter where you were shipping Gloomhaven. It was a ridiculously cheap rate, and people used to point the finger at us and be like, "You're charging $25 to ship a copy of Too Many Bones. Gloomhaven ships for $10," and it's complicated, right? And again, what we're doing is we're doing psychology. It's a matter of just volume. You're betting 100% on the fact that your volume of sales, thanks to your shipping, and that shipping not being a psychological barrier to folks at the checkout screen, you're betting that volume is going to be able to make up the difference in what you're losing on your actual shipping charge. And also, it's important here to strictly define shipping. When we're talking about shipping, when I use that term, what I'm talking about is from Quartermaster in Florida, or from our warehouse. We ship a handful of things from here in-house if they're small things, because we can get a better rate sending them in a small envelope. But when I refer to shipping, I'm saying from Quartermaster, or from Spiral Galaxy if you're over in Europe, or Aetherworks if you're in Australia, but from our fulfillment center to your door. We're talking about shipping. That is what we're charging for in there. And
so we're not talking.
And yeah, to put it in right, yeah. So and to put that in perspective, the average copy of Too Many Bones now, because we just shrank the box because of the whole shipping fiasco going on over the last couple of years, we shrank the box down to its absolute most basic essentials. There's no air in that box like whatsoever anymore. But a copy of Too Many Bones costs us from Quartermaster to your door about $22. Again, it depends on where in the United States you are. That can vary a little bit. California is a little bit more than that. You know, here in Minnesota would be a little bit cheaper than that because it doesn't have far to go. A copy of Burn Cycle or Cloud Spire, which are bigger boxes, those cost us on average about $27 to ship. And that, again, that's just the shipping, and that's just the base game. So, you know, you have that trove chest behind you that would be more than $27 to ship. Number one, because it's more volume, and that has to ship separately, because otherwise we have a hard enough time protecting it and keeping it from getting damaged, even when it ships separately in a big, you know, protected box.
It's protecting things from this. I put this on my dining room table, and my dining room table still has the scratch marks from it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I apologize for that. But yeah, so that, yeah, just to be crystal clear and absolutely transparent, again, that doesn't include add-ons. It doesn't include if you do a Burn Cycle all in, there's a decent chance that's going to need to ship in 2 separate boxes. if you order a trove chest along with a bunch of other Too Many Bones stuff, you're paying on our website, $10 to $15 shipping or whatever, or free shipping if it's because that's going to be over $200. But if that's shipping in two separate boxes, we're paying at least $55 in shipping in the US, and shipping is more expensive over in Europe. So again, how do we do that? It's a volume game. It's purely a volume game, and we have seen sales significantly increase since we went to that flat rate shipping. Customers really, really appreciate it. And again, there's, we all know this. I was on restoration site a couple weeks ago. I wanted to order the limited Jeff Goldblum mini for the Jurassic Park Unmatched set, and I couldn't do it. It was $40 and $15 shipping to get it to Minnesota, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't make myself pull the trigger because I was like, $15 on a $40 box.
And that ratio honestly sounds good to me at this point. From what I've been seeing in different campaigns, it's getting harder and harder.
Yeah, and it does cost restoration $15, most likely, to get it to me. I'm not suspicious of their rates. I don't feel like I'm being gouged. It's just hard psychologically when I know Chip Theory is going to be at Gen Con. I know I might be able to pick it up from their booth at Gen Con, or there might be a sale in the future, or maybe I don't want this Jeff Goldblum mini. It's sold out now, so I missed out on my chance. Maybe I don't want sexy Jeff Goldblum as much as I want. It creates all this dissonance in you as a customer, and we know that, and so we've tried to eliminate that. And to a degree, we kind of have to, because we're not in distribution. You're not running into Chip Theory games everywhere you go. We're not at Target, whatever. So when we have a customer's attention on our website, which is the primary place that we sell, we have to convert them. It's really important for us as a business to convert them. And so we've gone to this massive subsidy of shipping in order to make that work for us. And that does work for us. It doesn't work for everybody. It just doesn't.
It's inherently dangerous. It's an inherently dangerous conversation that you have to be comfortable with the results, which go potentially either direction. It can have absolutely. I mean, the largest company in the world, Amazon, I don't know if the largest company, whatever they are, they're large. I don't know what they are, but they're large. But they clearly do it, and it works for them. So it's something that absolutely can work. We see that just left, right, and center. But also, most smaller companies don't. Most smaller individual things do not do it for a reason. It's because it's a risk. You have to be a certain size and a certain absorption that you're able to do it. I mean, in your case, if I'm not mistaken, and I know I'm not mistaken, I believe you paid something in the range of $400 to ship a package to Canada once.
Yeah. So and that's the danger, right? So now many companies, this is not to pat Chip Theory on the back, but a lot of companies would just cancel orders like this. We eat massive shipping bills all the time. I could point to several on the Spire campaign. This most recent one on the Burn Cycle campaign, we had a backer in Canada, and shipping in Canada, it's not flat rate, or it's at least a much higher flat rate. It's about $50 to ship to Canada. Canada, they have this thing where they haven't built any cities between their cities, which makes shipping things in Canada very, very challenging. But yeah, we had a customer who was up in the Arctic, and basically there's no roads in Canada that go up there. It has to be air freighted. There's no other option. And so this order was in the realm of $400 to $500 to ship up to this customer on Kickstarter, and they had paid the flat rate shipping on the campaign, and we ate that cost. Again, not every company can do that. And that's, I don't say that to brag. I'm just I pointed out because it's wild. It's wild what it costs to get stuff to certain places. There were a couple Spire and Cars Plunder orders in specific countries like Brazil and Russia, where getting the order to the customer ended up running us around $1,000, and that's not an exaggeration.
I thought I was pulling the story. I was like, I got the craziest story ever.
Yeah, well, I mean, and subsequently on subsequent campaigns, we have stopped shipping to Brazil and to Russia, and obviously, there's other issues in Russia now since that campaign a couple years ago. But I mean, it is that expensive. It just is. And if the easiest way to prove that out is simply to take your copy of Gloomhaven, take your copy of Burn Cycle, whatever it is that you got, the biggest game you've got, take it to the UPS store and ask them to ship it somewhere. And you're going to be looking at probably a $30 to $35 bill. And that does not include, storage in the warehouse. That does not include pick fees. So that's something that is invisible to a lot of customers. When we work with a fulfillment center, which is what allows us to get your orders out relatively expediently. If we were fulfilling ourselves here in our warehouse like we used to, orders would take a lot longer to get out. It's so if you take it to UPS, you're not paying any pick fees. You probably brought your own box. I don't know, maybe you buy a box there, but again, ultimately you're looking at about a $35 bill. Now I mentioned we work with Quartermaster because they're able to negotiate better rates with places like FedEx, and that is true. But again, still, if it's going to cost you $35 to ship a copy of Gloomhaven somewhere, it still costs us $27. So you can see the rate that we're getting isn't like. It's not like UPS agrees to ship Theory games, or FedEx in our case agrees to ship Theory games at like 75% off because we do enough volume. Like, we can get a better rate through Quartermaster, but even Quartermaster, the biggest player in the game, it still ends up costing us $27 to ship. So it's crazy. It's that expensive. I guess like there seems to be this disbelief that big companies can't ship for significantly cheaper, and the rates just keep going up. And now, typically fulfillment houses will release new rates annually. So on the 1st of January is when rates will change. With the fuel costs being what they are right now, I will not be surprised if we see kind of a mid-year adjustment of prices, because fuel costs are insane. So everybody's feeling the pinch, and and this fuel stuff doesn't really have anything to do with COVID. Even it just is what it is. So yeah, if you leave this video with one thing, just know it does cost this much. It is this crazy expensive, and especially when you look at campaigns that are going to need to come in multiple boxes. So I'm not going to comment on any other company's rates really, or there's been some controversial campaigns. You all know probably what I'm alluding to, but also I think of when when Massive Darkness 2 was landing, and I saw all these pictures across Facebook of people with their Massive Darkness 2 stack next to them, and it was about as tall as they were. So that was probably 2 to 3 boxes worth of content, right? Like, that needed to ship. And
to give context to that, the video that goes up on the channel later today is a Massive Darkness unboxing, and I literally just stopped halfway through, and I was like, "There's too much stuff here. I'm gonna call this video and just we'll it's all good." So any campaign that looks like it's going to ship with multiple boxes, right? And again, there are some obvious companies out there where if you go in on their campaign, you're probably going all in on that campaign, and you're probably looking at 2 to 3 boxes shipped to you. Again, 1 copy of Burn Cycle, $27. So think about a multiple box shipping that's coming to you, how much that likely costs. It's really, really expensive. Are other companies gouging in this area? Are they doing something nefarious? Not really. Again, it depends on how you figure out the cost of shipping. If you start to add freight into the shipping cost, which most companies historically have not done, but some companies have needed to start doing that because freight has gotten so crazy, it does cost as much to get huge board games to customers. It sucks. It sucks. It's not helping us. Again, and when I say us, I mean the broader board game industry. It's not helping anybody. It's hurting profit margins across the board. And again, it's creating all this dissonance for customers at the checkout. It's hurting margins. People are buying less games. Everything is just a mess. Right.
So there's nothing shady or nefarious about it. It just sucks, but it is reality. It is reality. That's really what I would say. I have a few questions
on some of the aspects you just touched upon. First of all, you kind of touched upon one thing. So when you say it costs you $27 to ship a copy of Burn Cycle, that's what? The shipping plus the materials, shipping the material and the handling. What's that inclusive of?
Yeah. So for us, that's the shipping. That is the box. That is the padding that goes inside of the box. Now, again, we work with Quartermaster. We pay for the best boxes that they offer. because Chip Theory games cost $150 now, and so we want to try and get those games to customers in as pristine of condition as possible. Um, excuse me. In addition to that, the lost my train of thought. Sorry. So it's a pick fee. That's a pick fee. That is the box. That's the padding. That's so we pay for the best box and padding that Quartermaster has to offer. That does not include warehousing fees or anything really on top of that. That's just strictly the shipping, like the process of them taking it, putting it in a thing, sending it to you as a customer.
Gotcha. So, and the reason I ask that is more along the lines just general when a person decides to go ahead and test this out and head to UPS and factor in that their copy costs 20 whatever it is $35 to ship. Also mentally add the box and mentally add your own time, because that's part of the conversation. Somebody has to deal with that over there. Secondly,
Right.
and now I lost my train of thought because that was one question was about that aspect. Oh, secondly, and you touched upon this. The second thing you started touching upon is to what degree would you say you've seen increases in the cost of shipping, not freight, just shipping over the past whatever 6 months.
Yeah. So man, 6 months. I know that the rate increase from QML year over year, I want to say it was around 20%. It was around a 20% increase this last year. So and we raised our rates accordingly, and we're constantly looking at that and weighing what we're actually charging and what the actual costs are. But yeah, I believe it was about a 20% increase this last year. And again, most of that is not like, that's not Quartermaster being mean to us. Most of that is just FedEx's rates. And fulfillment houses have had a tremendously difficult time keeping people. And when I say fulfillment houses, I also mean FedEx in general.
Yeah.
I mean all the UPS, FedEx, and then places like Quartermaster. Everybody has had a really, really hard time keeping employees on staff, because it's been a super high stress last 2 years between people getting COVID because they're working in a warehouse, that kind of thing. Online shopping increased leaps and leaps and leaps and bounds beyond what it already was. So there was way more packages going out and that kind of thing. So again, Quartermaster is largely at the mercy of FedEx, because that's who they're negotiating with. And maybe they'll switch to UPS, or maybe they'll get offered better rates. But again, now we've got the fuel crisis on top of all of this. And again, we don't know when or how much rates will increase and that sort of thing. But odds are it's going to get even worse, more than likely.
Yeah.
So
I'm seeing a question from Paul in the chat and there's a bunch of questions I've been seeing. I'll get to them as I can to some degree, but Paul has a question which I know the answer to, but I'll let you jump into it and we
sure.
figure it out. But why don't we see some campaign changes from the all-in campaigns of 18 boxes to a box designed to hold all of that in as small a footprint as possible?
So largely that, it depends on the company. Number one, like that's a cop-out answer, but I can say I can answer for Chip Theory. Our best margin products are small boxes. So, if you want to, and whatever you think of Jamie Stegmaier and his industry analysis over the years, in general, he's got a blog post out there that says, healthy margins on a board game are 4 to 5x markup, right? So that's beyond your manufacturing cost. Again, that does not include freight generally, but because that freight ebbs and flows, but 4 to 5 times markup on your manufacturing cost. We do significantly less than that on our big box titles, or at least we did previously prior to this price increase. So where we make our money as a company, primarily our largest profit center is on expansion content. So selling gear locks for Too Many Bones and that sort of thing. Selling that all together, there comes an expectation that it will be significantly cheaper, and so you lose a whole bunch of margin in the process. Again, you may make that up on volume. Depends on the game, depends on the overall cost, but that's a thing. For us, and this doesn't necessarily apply to the rest of the industry. For us, it's hard enough shipping a 15-pound game, and Chip Theory games are solid chunks of like weight. It's hard enough for us to get that to a customer without damage inside the box as it is. adding any more weight inside of that base game box. So you've got that trove chest behind you. If we tried to pack too many bones into that trove chest and ship it anywhere, it would be a nuclear bomb. It would just it would collapse and it would explode everywhere, and there'd be chips galore all over the place. It'd be a mess. But to your point, lots of companies are trying to reduce the amount of air in their box, and they're trying to get things down to the most compact package possible. Again, we reduced when we released Too Many Bones, we left lots of room in the box for expansions. That was intentional. That was not us trying to make the game look bigger than it was. It was like, no, we're going to come out with expansion content, and we want you to be able to fit that all in here and not need to dig through a bunch of boxes. But this last year, we reduced the volume of the Too Many Bones box by almost exactly 50%.
Yeah, it's insane. I legit watched that video twice to be like, I don't see how that's possible. Did you make smaller chips? And you're like, no, the content's the same.
Right. Yeah. So we're not the excuse me. We're not the only company doing that. Lots of companies are. Man, I hope I don't lose my voice here.
I can take over if you want. Give you a second. So the other aspect I was going to touch upon as well is not just that aspect, but just the aspect of the logistics involved in trying to accurately predict and or pack the configuration somebody wants of 18 different expansions is a whole different conversation as well, because that has to happen somewhere. And somewhere along the road that has to be packed and pulled and created, and it's not that it won't potentially save, it's that the savings you're going to get might just be offset anyways by whatever degree of extra picking you're adding. So it's tempting, and the more shipping goes up, it might become to a point where the pick costs and the logistics cost make something worthwhile, but it's already a mess trying to get 18 different SKUs as it is, but 18 different SKUs, and you need some of those SKUs to have boxes, some without boxes, and the ones that don't have boxes can't just be packed normally. They have to be condensed and manufactured into your container, and then people still have their objectives. I might not care about the plastic insert in my container, you might want your plastic insert, and you're just trying to create more and more layers of costs. One thing that companies have talked about a lot is the idea that when you have these different SKUs for a meeple version and a mini version, sometimes it ends up costing the company the same money, and they're just doing it to make the backers happy, because it is what it is, and sometimes you have to do things and suck up costs to make people happy. But the nature of dealing with different SKUs is just an absolute nightmare, and it would make it harder.
Yep. And it seems simple. It seems simple when you sit back and just think about it. You're like, well, just print the amount you need. Mm-hmm. You always have to print more than you need, because there may be damaged components, there may be damaged boxes, there may be just issues. One may sell way better than the other, and you have no way of really knowing that on a crowdfunding campaign. The other thing I was going to say is that a lot of customers don't want to go all in on all in on a game right off the bat, especially if it's expensive. Lots of people do, but many people don't. Lots of people prefer to buy it piecemeal. We try not to do almost any Kickstarter exclusives, so we lean into that and we allow people to buy things over time. Our games are expensive. Other companies, they push everything on Kickstarter and it's not available at retail later. Again, different models for different companies. I'm not really commenting on that, but ultimately, it's typically better for the customer long term to allow them to buy that stuff piecemeal rather than trying to force them into FOMO and getting absolutely everything all at once. On our Too Many Bones Unbreakable campaign, a literal all in for everything, and this was with a significant discount. A literal all in for everything in the Too Many Bones universe was $1,200, and even there were YouTube videos about this saying I mean, you guys ended up offering an option, but it didn't even cost less. Yeah. It didn't cost less. It was like, hey, it's going to cost us more, but it will save boxes. Right. Yeah. And then, we offered two different versions of Unbreakable, one with health chips and one without, because lots of people who have been buying Bones for a while already have the health chips and they don't need them. Again, that doesn't save us any money. We charge the same amount of money for it, and some people were offended by that, but because of just the way that manufacturing works and assembly in a factory works, it doesn't cost us any less, and it ends up being exactly the same, even though it has less stuff in it, which seems backwards, but that's reality.
Yeah, and these things are expensive. They're tough inherently. Let's talk about a few things. There's a whole bunch of stuff that we can jump into still, but let's start with freight. How's freight been for you?
Within the last month, it's been better after 2 years of what I could only describe as uh,
Nightmares.
absolutely terrible. Yeah. It's been better literally only within the last month. So, again, if you're most people following this conversation are probably aware of most of these numbers, but pre-COVID, a 40-foot container, if you were filling it entirely yourself with your own product, 40-foot container would run anywhere between $4,000 and $6,000 for us anyway. Again, I don't presume to know the numbers of other companies, but for us, it was around $4,000 to $6,000, and that would really depend on the speed of the ship that container is being put on. So a faster ship would be more expensive generally because you'd get your stuff faster, depending on the time of year. So various crunch points around the year would be, anything before the holidays, anything around Chinese New Year, where people are trying to get stuff out of China right before China shuts down for a month. So that's when we would see that higher end of the spectrum. COVID, sent containers as high as $30,000. And so over the course of the last 2 years, we paid $27,000 for a container once or twice. On average, we were paying, in the $24,000 to $25,000 range for a container. Again, depending on the time of year, depending on demand. In the last month,
these Facebook groups of like different publishers or retailers and all that, and like I still remember seeing like people, like one person who was like, "Oh my gosh, my container went from 6,000 to 22,000," and then like 15 people jumped in, being like, "Holy hell, how did you get 22,000? Can you point me to your person?" And it's just like such a startlingly sad conversation.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, in the last month, so we've sent. I think we've only sent one container in the last month from China so far. We have a whole bunch of stuff that'll be getting ready to send here in the next few weeks. But that container was about $13,000, a little over $13,000, which again felt like the deal of the century. And we're seeing some reports from other publishers. That I think the lowest I've seen was $11,000 from one publisher. But yeah, I mean, again, at best, we're still talking about 2 to 3 times what they were pre-COVID, which is wild. And that the worst part about that, you look at like our burn cycle campaign, and we charged, again, mind you, the MSRP of this game now is $150, but at the time we were planning on the MSRP being $130. And we charged the flat rate shipping for it. We took $30 off of the MSRP for the campaign. So it was $100 to buy it on the campaign. Kickstarter and whatever pledge manager you use and credit card fees, et cetera, take another 8% of whatever you raise. That's total. I'm not breaking it down individually, but they take another 8%. So for every copy of Burn Cycle we sold for $100, we lost another $8 on top of that. We charged $10 flat rate shipping. And again, one copy of the game in the US is $27. So we're eating $17 there of shipping minimum. So $17 eaten of shipping.
Down 25 total so far.
Yeah, exactly. And then again, I already mentioned to you that we had to raise the prices of our games because we're already on our base games not doing 4 to 5 times markup on our manufacturing costs. So between the overhead that it took to develop the game and the crowdfunding campaign itself, you look at the campaign, you're like, wow, they did $450,000 on Burn Cycle. Like that's a huge number, right? Like you look at that and you're like, that's more money than I can imagine ever having in my pocket. And they must be rolling in it. And it's amazing. We haven't crunched the final numbers yet because the project only finally finished fulfilling last week. And we're still waiting for like all the final invoices and everything from Spiral Galaxy in the UK and et cetera, et cetera. But we lost money on that campaign as a company overall. Now, again, that's okay for us. That's okay. Well, we're not sitting here like about to fold or go under or anything like that. It helped us get a new IP launched, and launching a new IP from development to production without crowdfunding in this day and age, especially for a deluxe, blinged out production, is incredibly expensive and risky. So this helped us gauge our initial print run, This helped us get it off the ground. It helped us pay for the art. And though we may have taken a loss on the campaign itself, we now have product in our warehouse that is selling very, very well. The game's being very well received. And,
And there's a
now we're
GameFound
starting to
campaign
make,
coming up shortly. Plug,
yeah,
everyone.
yeah,
Plug.
exactly. Yeah. In 2 weeks. Yeah. So, it's okay, but not every company can afford to do that. And two examples recently would be, the biggest one was Uthia.
Yep.
And now they've been picked up by Steamforge, and that's awesome. And, hopefully they're able to get their feet back under them, and hopefully it's a good business arrangement for them.
Yeah.
Um,
I think Steamforge is handling all the other stuff, and Uthia is just like, we're just making games now. That's what we wanted to do.
Yeah, which is awesome. But all of that happened.
You said two campaigns,
but it significantly. What was that? Sorry.
You said two campaigns or two companies.
Yeah. So the other one was, and we were watching them closely because they were doing another, like, chips like us, but it was a game called Dawn Shade through their Highborn Games.
Yeah.
Highborn Games has folded. They're done. They lost a lot of money on shipping and freight at the end of the day, and production, and they were in the red on the project, and they are not moving forward. They had planned to do a reprint.
And they're far from the only ones. We've seen many companies issuing
Right.
their statements or step backs. Box Throne, I don't think they closed as a company, but they said they're no longer doing the Box Thrones. It's just not viable. We saw the Quest for El Dorado, what's it called? What's the name of the company? El Dorado Games. They basically said, hey, we're stepping back. This is now a part-time thing because we just can't make money on this. So we can't make money on $20,000 a piece a year. So, I mean, that's another conversation we haven't even talked about. We briefly talked about the nature of just cost versus, yes, companies need to make money. I mean, Chip Theory Games has a ton of employees, and then there's the actual profit. Making money is not a bad thing, but there's lots of stuff's happening.
Right. Yeah. And so where I was going with that is, the companies that got really, really burned are the companies that charged little for shipping pre-COVID on a campaign, and then ended up, being surprised by this nightmare once they actually went into production. So now you have a bunch of companies looking at the fact that, okay, we've had 2 years of hell, and now we have 1 month of evidence that, like, okay, costs are coming down a little bit. What do we charge?
Yes.
Literally, what do we charge? And it's really, really, really hard to know. Yeah. And again, we've talked about the difference between shipping and freight. In general, companies tend to build freight into their MSRP in some capacity. Things like overhead, freight, warehousing, all of that is kind of built into the MSRP of the game. That it's not really thought of as shipping costs, but that freight cost has gone so high that now, it's not that, again, this is not like a nefarious thing like, ooh, we need to hide freight over here so that we can pay for it. We need to hide freight over here. It's just, it has to go somewhere.
If you're operating with a 4 to 5 times markup on the price, throwing it on the price doesn't do the customer any favors. It makes it worse.
Right. So now any campaign that's running right now is like, okay, yeah, containers are cheap. Are they going to stay cheap?
Mm-hmm.
Probably, because it seems like we're kind of coming out of the fog, but undercharging in this area is what literally put several companies out of business. I believe the other one I was thinking of, they never released a statement on why, but I have a feeling that TMG, Tasty Minstrel Games, I think it was likely shipping and like manufacturing related, and just issues trying to get all their SKUs over here. And there's others, that I know of from private conversations, and others that were public too.
I know Mint Tin Games, whatever the name of the company is, I think they've gone a little AWOL. I don't know what's happening or not happening.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I again, it's just like it's nothing nefarious. It's really hard to know. It's really, really, really hard to know what to do as a publisher right now in terms of what you charge for MSRP, what you charge for shipping, what you charge on Kickstarter or whatever crowdfunding. It's a little bit of a crapshoot, and it's a little bit scary, especially if you're not a well-established brand and a well-established company. We have paid a lot of money to learn from a lot of expensive mistakes, and we had the benefit of starting before this huge crowdfunding boom. We were on the early end with the original Hoplomachus campaigns, and we were able to kind of grow and learn and adapt over the years as the industry changed and as a lot of these things changed. And again, we were fortunate to be in a financial position to weather lots of these mistakes. Not every company can do that, and not every company is that fortunate. And the competition is, so much more intense now than it was a few years ago. So it's just a challenging environment in general for everybody. That's why, shipping is, it's a conversation. It's not this like hard and fast like thing that can be bullet pointed and talking pointed out and just say like, this is the exact math. It changes every day, and there's so many hidden costs and little niggles that can get you all over the place. So yeah.
Now, Stacey has a question in the chat that relevant to this aspect that I'll tackle as well, but feel free to jump in as well. Which is, she says, it still sounds crazy to me, even though we've been hearing about it. It sounds like price gouging from the shippers. Are there no regulations? The idea that we suddenly have these containers that go from $4,000 to $27,000, like that's insanity. And so I'll answer on two counts over there to a degree, which is, first of all, regulations are inherently complicated when you're talking about something this international. So just the idea of regulations, which isn't the craziest concept, but it's just inherently complicated to actually enforce any form of regulations, because anything bound by one country, any country that's not being enforced, just changes the entire conversation. But also, like, something that's interesting, an interesting, like, random tidbit is the price of film during World War II. Where during World War II, the film became an essential commodity and the price of it jumped up very significantly. And suddenly the demand for film became more significant, and demand for just all these things. And suddenly this resource that had one price that everyone thought was the price, suddenly it turns out people could afford and did afford to pay 2, 3, 4 times the value for that product. And even though after World War II it went back down, it never went back down quite as much. Sometimes in life we find out what the actual price point of a product is that people are willing to pay. We're seeing that right now in the entire labor economy. The entire labor economy of the country is changing because suddenly employees are realizing, hey, if enough people quit their jobs, more companies offer more money, and then they leave their company to go to the next company, and the next company has to offer more money, and suddenly the entire labor economy of the entire world has changed because people discovered by force what the actual value of a product was. So regulations are complicated. Maybe $6,000 was undercharging it. Maybe that was not a fair price. But now it is. Board games too. I remember a conversation going back, way back, a conversation over on Quacklope. There's a debate between Jan and Jesse from Quacklope about should board games cost more. And Jesse was arguing that it should cost more, that companies were sacrificing and giving up just in order to be in this industry. And it was a weird conversation, and a lot of people in the comments were like, why are board games costing more? It's already cost me $80 for this game. That seems incredibly over the top. But actually, it costs a ton, and the margins on board games are low. One of the reasons we saw these delays in shipping was when the container prices jumped to 30K, or whatever numbers they were, companies that were selling electronics could eat those margins because their margins were better. Companies selling board games were like, hey, if we're making 20% on this Kickstarter, we can't eat that. We just can't. And I think that we're seeing this entire trickle-down effect from the cost of containers all the way to the cost of the board game you're paying for, where people may have been undercharging and the real value may have been significantly more complicated, and we're just about to find what the breaking point for all these things is.
Yeah. And I don't know if there was gouging happening. To answer the question directly, I don't know. I don't feel comfortable making any assumptions to that. And I do know for a fact that the biggest issue though was not that we have the same amount of containers to go around and we're just charging more for them because COVID. Like it wasn't that simple. COVID played a role. There were less people because people were getting sick, like crews on ships and everything like that became much, much more challenging. Unloading containers at docks and that kind of thing, again, due to COVID outages and shutdowns and that kind of thing became much more challenging. The biggest issue though was the global rotation of containers. So, when pre-COVID, containers are going around the world, right? They're going everywhere. They come to a country, they go back to a country, they go over here, they go over there. When COVID hit, what happened was basically China was still exporting a whole bunch of stuff because demand for all these goods like skyrocketed across the world. And
demand, and also they saw the shutdowns earlier, and they were up and running sooner as the U.S. was being hit by these things.
Yeah, and so all of these containers left China and went to their destinations, and a whole bunch of other countries then started shutting down, and their exports decreased. and then there were backups, and that those backups at ports meant that containers were rotating even more slowly. And so what happened is the entire container rotation of the world ended up getting all out of sync and all out of whack. And so I don't know if it was so much gouging, but what would often happen to us is it'd be like we'd try to book a container, be like, okay, it's going to be $21,000, and we'd be like, cool, lock it in, and then the next day we'd get a call and they'd be like, actually, it's $23,000, and we'd be like, okay, lock it in. And then the next day we'd get a call and it'd be like, actually, it's $25,000. They never told us what was going on behind the scenes. Like, I don't think these prices were just magically like ebbing and flowing by thousands of dollars every day. I do think they were pitting us against other companies who were also trying to book that same container. And they were basically just playing back and forth between, 2, 3, 4 companies. And they were just, if you want to call that gouging, I guess you can call that gouging. I mean, it's supply and demand, though. There was only enough containers for X amount of people, and so they're going to get the highest price that they can. That's capitalism. Like love it or hate it, that's capitalism. They were just getting what they could. They weren't just like randomly raising these prices. So like, this is, as you said, Alex, it's what people were willing to pay because they had to pay it, because it is that valuable to them to have their product overseas. So yeah, I mean, look at it however you want, but it wasn't a mass conspiracy. There was a legitimate shortage of containers over in China, not enough of them to handle the amount of product that they were trying to get out of their ports. So
right. Now, before I continue going with this, it is 10:55. I don't know exactly how much time you have or want to have or all those things. We keep going, but I also want to be mindful of your time.
I'm good. I'm good.
So I'll keep going. I'm going to aim for like maximum 11:30 just for the sake of putting a cut on this, but we'll see how it goes. Usually I do these for an hour, but it's very active and very happening, so we'll see what happens. But
as long as my AirPods battery, as long as my AirPod batteries don't die, that's really the only thing that's the only clock I'm on today.
So one question from way earlier, and again, it's one I want to jump into first. Feel free to take as well, but it's from way earlier, and I think it represents a large of the sense of unfairness. It's a question I've seen a lot over the year that's been happening, which is, what if shipping dropped significantly? Would companies refund your money? Would companies suddenly say, oh, I know you paid like, $30 for this, but it's actually only $10, so here's $20 back? And I want to jump into that one from a stance of multiple factors, some of which we vaguely touched upon peripherally. The first is, practically speaking, that just doesn't happen, not to a large enough degree. Meaning $30 down to $25 is one conversation, $30 down to $10 we haven't seen. Whereas we are seeing $30 to $60. We are seeing massive increases in costs, whereas not seeing massive decreases. And your question, though, still stands in theory, because, well, what if it did? Would we see companies refund the money? I think the answer in most cases is no, but there's a lot of buts attached to that. But this is a sense of unfairness. The first is what we just mentioned a second ago. Board game companies often have significantly lower margins than they should, especially when it's a smaller startup company with 3 people who had this idea, whatever. They're just desperately trying to make a board game. Meaning the sacrifice on their end, from a pure economy standpoint, from a pure which business or company should you be in, from a pure economy standpoint, they've already made the sacrifice by choosing to be in the board game industry and choosing to take lower margins just for the sake of being here. And so if they happen to get a bit of a windfall and happen to make more money, I'm cool with it. Versus the reverse, and this is my own opinion, all this is my own opinion, the reverse is not true. When they already took that sacrifice and then shipping prices go up and they're like, oh, I have to mortgage my home to actually not fail people, that's messy. And so I have a greater degree of, and by the way, I know of multiple companies, multiple people who have mortgaged their homes. I'm not using that peripherally. I'm saying it's a thing that has happened just to actually deliver. The second aspect, if I can remember, because I had a second aspect to this, was the cost, the companies. Oh my gosh, completely lost my train of thought. The cost of shipping, the cost of production. I totally had a chain of thought that I just blanked on. Wow. That's disappointing. I had a point 2 that's going to go to. Interesting. I'll come back to point 2, Josh. Do you want to jump into that?
Yeah. So I can't speak for any other company. But I mean, your first point stands. Like I don't see that ever happening. Number one, like that's a hypothetical that, again, because so much of what is happening is already subsidized behind the scenes. That you're not even aware of in various capacities. I just don't see I don't see a company ever like massively, to the point of outrage anyway. I
Yeah.
don't see a company ever like massively overcharging for shipping. Now, again, if you want to look at something like the latest controversial campaign on Kickstarter that I continue to talk around and not name, the base game cost of the base game cost of that shipping wise was, maybe would fall into that category. However, I don't think anybody ever backs those campaigns and just backs the base game. Maybe I'm wrong. Um, the internet anyway would suggest otherwise based on what I see on social media and that kind of thing. So I think what they're probably doing is charging the average there in terms of but I don't know. Again, I don't know. I don't know their books. But in general, let's throw that outlier out the window, as most statisticians would do. In general, looking across the entire industry, I don't think that's going to happen where any company is like massively overcharging to a degree that is outrageous. And that's mostly, again, because the costs are just outrageous. Yep. That's just and those costs are what they are. Again, pre-fuel crisis, which is now happening. We're not even really seeing those costs as they relate to the fuel crisis right now because of contracts being signed for a year and that kind of thing. What would chip theory do? I guess again,
well, you ate $400 in shipping, so I guess that's the answer.
Yeah. I can say refunds, giving mass refunds are really, really complicated logistically. As much of a like cop out as that probably sounds like, giving mass refunds in any capacity, especially if we have to do it like per customer. So if that value adjusts per customer, that is a very, very, very manual process. If we were forced to do that in some capacity on, say, like Too Many Bones Unbreakable, a campaign with 10,000 plus backers, I don't know that we literally have the people power to do that in a way that wouldn't take us at least a year to go through that list. But we have had cases where we overcharged for sales tax in a particular state. Sales tax is a complicated one. You have to do X amount of sales in a certain state before you're required to pay sales tax in that state. We have charged sales tax in states before where we had not, they call it a nexus, where we hadn't hit that nexus yet, but we assumed that we were going to based on where our numbers for the year were currently at. Then at the end of the year, found out that we had not reached said nexus and we did not actually need to collect that sales tax from those customers. And we have refunded them for that. We didn't have to. Legally speaking, we could have just, as long as we didn't keep the money ourselves, as long as we either paid it back to the customer or paid it to that state, regardless of whether we had hit that nexus or not, it was legal for us to hang on to the money if we paid it forward. And we refunded that money to customers. So as it relates to shipping, I don't know. Again, that's a hypothetical. I can't say, but we try to do good by our customers always. So that's chip theory. I can't speak for other companies.
I remember my second point, is that something people don't see a lot of is all the costs that companies are eating that you're not seeing the increases for. That it's very easy to say, well, where's my refund? What about this? What about the costs go down? But most I don't want to say most, I don't have information. Many companies are seeing massive losses in the shipping in board games and are just eating it. I know from talking to multiple people directly in this company that they're like, and usually this is more true with larger companies, but it's also true with smaller ones, where they just eat as much as they possibly can. No one wants to go back to their backers and say, hey, give us more money. And so companies are eating and eating and eating. This is not a question of the first time there's an increase in cost, they go to the backers and say, okay, well, shipping went up by $5 per game, please give us $5 per game. No, this is where it goes up by 5 and they're like, we can take it. And it goes up by 10 and they're like, well, we can take it. And it keeps going up and it hits a breaking point with different companies, and some companies didn't hit that breaking point. I know a company that lost $400,000 on a single campaign, but they just said, we're going to eat it and hopefully make it back over the course of whatever. It is what it is. And so it's easy for us on the consumer side to kind of see it as, oh, you have an increase in cost and you ask for money, what about the refund? But that's usually not the way it works. It's usually increase, ask for money, and we never see the refund dipped low enough to that point where it becomes a reasonable conversation. I do have a question for you, Josh, from the
Yeah.
chat over here, which is I'm going to go my own bias, but this is not something I know as well, which is agree to take this is referencing what I said earlier, where companies are agreeing to take lower margins. And someone said the Druid City guy, James Hudson, said that his margins are 30%, which is astronomically high. My perception, which could be completely incorrect in the board game industry, is 30% is astronomically high if you're a reseller. If you're someone who's buying and reselling something, if you're a store or something like that, 30% is great margins. But from a manufacturing standpoint, I believe 30% is pretty bad.
Yeah, from a manufacturing perspective, I mean, again, everybody's got a different model, right? So, again, what Jamie says is
James Hudson.
right. But I'm sorry, Jamie Stegmeyer, his blog, 4 to 5 times markup, right, on your manufacturing costs. What most companies are attempting to do, though, is to get into distribution and get into retail and get in, be on Amazon, be in your local FLGS. And that sort of thing. So what happens is then distribution. So if let's say your game costs $10 to make, you want to sell it for $50. That's its MSRP. It costs you $10 to make, and then if you put it into distribution, the distributor is going to take another percentage, and then the retailer who's selling the game is going to take another percentage. And in the end, you're left with whatever you're left with. Chip Theory's model is to not be in distribution. We do sell directly to retail stores and that kind of thing. But that's how we make our high-end production work for us, is that we sell direct to customer. And by cutting out a distributor, cutting out a retailer, we can afford to make these crazy productions that other companies can't afford to make, because we don't have to eat those, or we don't have to lose those margins from retailers and from distributors. So yes, you're exactly right, Alex. 30% on manufacturing cost would be very bad. But after everything is said and done, if you're making 30% on a game after it goes, after it sells at retail, that's very good. Yep.
Gotcha. Let's see. Do I have any specific things I want to cover? There's no specific questions I want to talk about at the moment. I may have missed some. There's a lot going on in chat. I'm just trying to remember the ones. I have the box. I'm just going on notes. State of the industry, freight, final costs, all of that we covered. I think one thing I want to touch upon briefly, which again we touched upon as well, but I'm just seeing a conversation going on in chat to a degree about this stuff, is just the nature of cost of goods versus a company actually making money, which now it's my turn to cough. Cost of goods versus a company actually making money, which is the general idea is it's very easy, and I know I've seen this comment, especially like using Marvel Zombies as an example. I remember seeing this about they had like these extra, I don't know, 10 zombies, whatever it is, and they're charging like, $12 for it, and it's the miniature production plastic is like 17 cents, whatever. But manufacturing is just one tiny component. At the end of the day, companies are trying to make money. That is the goal of a company, and we're not even talking about factoring in and that making money is not just cost of goods. A general company comes down to two things. There's the cost of goods, the cost to actually make that physical thing you're buying, and then there's the overhead that gets fully distributed across everything. The overhead is a cost. The overhead is, before we even talk about profits, we're talking about employees, wages, warehousing, freight. I saw one comment earlier from Asafidius who was like, well, why should I charge? Shouldn't the company eat the freight? Why should I pay that? The answer is you're paying it no matter what. The question is where that cost goes into, but you are paying it. Right. Companies are, if a company incurs a cost, that cost goes into their model, it goes into their everything, so that they can then pass off the cost. Are there industries or people or companies which they find these small opportunity costs and then turn it into a larger cost for you and somehow make money? Absolutely, they exist. Are they the commonality? I mean, based on watching companies in the board game space close left, right, and center and struggle and have to really reach for it, I'm guessing it's the minority and not the majority. But for the most part, there's costs left, right, and center to just not lose money as a company, which should be the starting baseline for a company. But then past that, there is profit. People invest, people sacrifice. People who start companies, they do actually, for the most part, go out on a major limb to make this work. And the reward for that, in my opinion, should not be that you manage to make exactly what you managed to make at a minimum wage job or anything else. The goal, the dream, should be that they can actually make money. They sacrificed, they risked, they went on all these things to do something. I am fine with people making money. I want them to make money. I want them to do well. One thing I remember, I've gone on this tangent multiple times, specifically around Oathsworn, because Oathsworn and Marvel Zombies were both compared a lot as far as the handling of increased costs. And
Right.
Oath1 keeps being held up as this bar because they worked on a game for 4 years. Ran a $2 million campaign, not a small little campaign, and then they proceeded to not make any money and lose money, and then ask their backers for a few dollars more with the explanation that we made nothing on this campaign, but we have to ask for like a little bit more. Please help us. And people are like, look what that's what a company should do. I'm like, that's not what a company should do. Kudos to Oath1. Support the next campaign. Give them money, please. But that's not the bar. The bar is not people working for free for 4 years because they want to be super nice. The bar should be a company being a company, ideally not gouging, but who defines what gouging is? It's a complicated conversation. But the bar is certainly not no profit, no money, no anything. When you buy something that costs
Well,
15 cents, you're helping a company actually make money.
yeah. Well, and that conversation gets much more complicated when you introduce crowdfunding. And I think that's the tension.
Mm-hmm.
And as a company that has embraced crowdfunding, I think to its biggest and largest extent over the course of the last 5 to 7 years, I can say it's a tricky PR web to navigate. It's a tricky relationship to navigate, especially if it's your first time doing it. I and having been, I've backed several campaigns myself, obviously being interested in board games, but people give you their money up front, right? And they are trusting you as a business that you have worked out the math, that you have, that you are not terrible at business and that you are going to likely keep some for yourself. The challenge and the issue comes from those unexpected costs that literally nobody could have seen coming. You know what I mean? Like nobody, there hasn't been a pandemic in 100 years prior to COVID. And so, so not only did nobody see that pandemic coming, nobody knew what it was going to do to costs of things that affect the board game industry. That's not an industry that is usually high on the like global needs list, as it relates to when humanity is suffering from a pandemic. So, I sympathize with those companies, but yeah, I mean, yeah, we want to make a living, right? Like I get to do this full time as a career, and that's incredible, and I'm thankful for it every single day. But most board game companies, we Chip Theory, we've grown to about 20 to 25 employees, depending on how you factor in contractors. We are one of the largest company. Minnesota is kind of, and Minneapolis is kind of a hotbed of board game companies between Fantasy Flight / Asmodee. Leader Games is here in the Twin Cities. Floodgate Games is here in the Twin Cities. There's a couple others, two smaller ones. We are Leader Games isn't hiring tons and tons of people. They do a whole bunch of stuff via contract. They have a very, very small office. We, until recently, had a very, very small office. Floodgate Games, they contract almost everything out. They don't have a bunch of full-time employees. Even Stonemaier is a very, very, very lean company. And that is because, again, it's typically cheaper to do things via contract in the long term than to try and sustain a bunch of people's living wage as a company. So we're trying to do it a different way, just like we try to do everything a different way. But yeah, I mean, I would hope most backers out there would want creators in general to be making a profit and to be able to make a livelihood off of the creation of things that they enjoy and want to support. But again, that line is gray when the money is paid upfront for a product site largely unseen with no guarantee that it's ever going to arrive. That changes things. That changes the conversation. Yeah. And so I sympathize with both backers and publishers in that respect. And yeah, in a situation like Oathsworn, and there's been others, I think by the time Serious Pulp reprinted all the cards for Seventh Continent, I don't know how much they ended up making even on that campaign, because that was a mess in terms of needing to reprint essentially their entire print run.
I mean, even Gloomhaven, and I don't know this for sure, but I remember hearing that like they didn't make money on their campaign. They made money in retail. They lost the production.
Right. And it's a challenging thing. And I think it's fair for backers to expect that the people they're giving money to, the businesses they're giving money to, have their proverbial bleep together in that sense. But again, I just encourage everybody to have also, simultaneously have sympathy for the challenges of the last several years. You do have a bunch of people who are hanging on by the skin of their teeth, either personally or as a company, trying to keep their company afloat while they try to navigate these waters. And now you have coming out of this, you now have a whole bunch of publishers and people still hanging on by the skin of their teeth a little bit, who are terrified to make the same mistake again, and don't, again, because of the unpredictable nature of this pandemic and costs and that kind of thing, they don't necessarily, the smart thing to do from a business perspective is to overcharge to make sure that you're protected and you have a little bit of a hedge against all these things. It's awesome that Oathsworn ate those costs for their customers. Like, that's a tremendous thing to do for the customers. I hope it benefits them tremendously on their inevitable reprint campaign
coming later this year.
Yeah, and that's what, again, I think a lot of people have looked at, like, the Gloomhaven model and even Chip Theory, on reprints. Too Many Bones has always done well on subsequent reprint and expansion campaigns, but that model in this day and age now has become very, very, very tenuous. I think Euthia mostly did that. I don't, pandemic or not, I can't imagine they were going to make a ton of money on that enormous box the first go around. They were counting, obviously, on their reprint campaign blowing up and being a massive success. It did do very, very well before they canceled it, but it wasn't enough. They needed huge, astronomical success to make those numbers work. And it's a challenge. And the other thing is that, like, I don't even think the board game industry and customers understand why some games blow up and some don't.
So it's like a video. Just make the video go viral. Just make it go viral.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, working in social media, that used to be, I worked for a higher ed institution. They'd be like, we should make viral videos. Yeah. And it's idea. Like, yeah, we should go for it. Got some ideas. Things blow up sometimes. Again, Stonemaier, nobody thought Wingspan with its bird watching theme was going to become the next mega hit of the entire universe. I would even, Arc Nova, which is blowing up right now, also does not have the look or the theme that I would look at and be like, that's the next big thing.
The first time I saw Arc Nova, I literally looked at it and I was like, this looks like garbage. I'm not, like, really that interested. I mean, Capsule makes good games, but, like, I'm not interested.
Right. I don't, I'm not into elephants, and that's fine. Nobody knows. So, like, Too Many Bones, if you go back and look at that for Chip Theory, everything about that game looks wrong from a, like, how to succeed in board games perspective. I think that's why it ultimately ended up succeeding. But you'd look at that, and if you would say, like, yeah, this is going to sustain a multi-million-dollar company for the next 5 years, and they're going to become the poster child for premium production games moving forward. If you go back and look at our original campaign, you'd be like, yeah, right. Like, absolutely not. So, nobody knows. You can't plan for success, and so you kind of have to plan for failure, to be frank. And so if companies, again, to bring it back full circle to shipping and manufacturing costs increasing, all that kind of stuff, you have to charge a little bit more if you want to be safe, because it's getting harder and harder and harder to make a living in the current industry environment, again, without raising prices. But raising prices is terrifying as well. And you don't want to be the first company that raises prices, because then you look like the bad guy and everybody starts pointing their fingers at you. It's just challenging. It's just challenging. That's all. And so
if you're the first, you look like the bad guy. If you're the last, you look like you're just looking for the opportunity. Oh, everyone's doing it, I can make more money.
Right.
Like, there's like a weird line where being like third, fourth, and fifth are perfect, and everyone else is a terrible person.
Right. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, that's all. And again, I've said a few times, the main point I hope everybody listening to this conversation takes away is just that this is a complicated issue that can't be boiled down to simplistic talking points and basic math. Like, it's really complicated, and it changes all the time, every day.
Yeah. And I think with that, we're going to go ahead and close things up. Josh, I really appreciate your time. This was a fun conversation, for me at least. I can't speak for everyone who's hearing about their board games getting more expensive, but I had fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, and for anyone who missed the first 10 minutes, we spent the first 10 minutes talking about, what's it called? Elder Scrolls. So in case that's more interesting, well, then why are you still here after an hour and 20 minutes? But you can check that out later, or at any point. This video will be up, and make sure to stay tuned for Burn Cycle over on GameFound in 2 weeks. When is Elder Scrolls, by the way?
What was that? Sorry, what was that?
When is Elder Scrolls?
Well, again, so if you missed the conversation at the beginning of this chat, we don't know exactly. We're hoping to launch it on GameFound this fall. A lot of that is going to have to do with just the approval process with our licensing partner, Bethesda, who are also currently dealing with a whole like company merger with Microsoft.
Hmm.
So, yeah, we're hoping to bring it to GameFound this fall. If not, it will hopefully be early next year. We haven't announced a date yet for that reason. We're kind of waiting to see. It's very, very, very far along in development. There's a whole bunch of art done for it already. We just can't show it to you yet because it all needs approval from Bethesda before we can talk about it in more detail. So
Is
either
it
this fall or early next year.
is it
Yeah.
maintaining the general Chip Theory Games style or approach?
It is, yeah. So I mean, it'll still be neoprene, still be chips, and I know there's big chip supporters out there, and there's also people who think they're stupid, and that's fine. You do you. But yeah, still it'll have lots of neoprene, lots of chips, lots of cool mats, lots of dice. Again, it's the combat system is and character building system modeled heavily after Too Many Bones, but it is a completely new game. It's the biggest, most audacious thing that we've ever made. We're really, really, really excited about it. If we we're excited enough about this system that had we not been able to land the Elder Scrolls IP, we would definitely be developing this game anyway with a different theme and a different skin. So it's I think it's going to blow people away. Can't wait to show more, and we will show more as soon as we are legally speaking allowed to. So.
Very cool. And with that, we'll wrap it up. Again, thanks for the time, and to everyone else, I hope you enjoyed the conversation. And Burn Cycle, 2 weeks on GameFound. I'm gonna keep plugging it because while I'm
Yeah,
here, why not?
yeah, you got it.